The order is already moving. It exists before anyone reads it, before it is acknowledged, before it is stamped, before it is copied and passed along. It moves because it was written to move. Because movement is what orders do once they are made formal. Paper changes hands, signals are relayed. Words are repeated exactly as received, without emphasis, without alteration. Each transfer strips the order of context and replaces it with certainty. The language is precise. The phrasing is fixed. There is no room left inside it for interpretation. No one asks where it began. That question is not part of the process. Origins are irrelevant once authorization has been confirmed. What matters is that the wording matches the format, that the signatures align with expectation, that the timing fits within the operational window already defined somewhere else by something else. The order does not explain itself. It does not justify its existence. It assumes compliance because compliance is assumed everywhere. The system it travels through was designed to remove hesitation, to reduce friction, to prevent delay. Each layer it passes through exists to confirm that the layer below will act without deviation. Acknowledgement is brief, a simple confirmation. Received, understood, executing. There is comfort in this repetition, comfort in knowing that nothing new must be decided. The order carries its own authority, reinforced each time it is repeated verbatim. Each repetition strengthens it, not by adding information, but by removing doubt. Clocks are synchronized. Schedules align. Preparations occur quietly, efficiently, without discussion. The order has already been accounted for in planning cycles that anticipate orders as a constant. It fits into a structure built to accept it without resistance. No one pauses to consider whether the conditions that justified the order still exist. Conditions are assumed to be static, unless formally declared otherwise. The order contains no mechanism for self-correction. It was not written to change. It was written to be followed. The system recognizes it immediately. Forms are completed. Checklists are reviewed. The order is logged, tracked, and confirmed. Each confirmation creates a record that the order is valid, current, and active. Each record becomes another reason not to question it. There is no sense of urgency yet, only readiness, the kind that comes from routine, from familiarity, from having done this many times before, with different words that looked almost exactly the same. The order does not raise voices. It does not demand attention. It moves quietly, confidently, through channels that exist solely for its passage. Its power lies not in force, but in inevitability. By the time it reaches its final recipients, it no longer feels like a decision. It feels like a condition, something that has always been there, something that cannot be altered without disrupting everything around it. The system has accepted it. What follows is no longer a question of choice. The environment that receives the order is already arranged to accommodate it. Nothing shifts to make room. Nothing bends. The structure remains exactly as it was designed to be, because the structure anticipates orders as a constant presence. It does not react to them. It absorbs them. Layers exist for a reason. Each one performs a specific function, refined over time to eliminate ambiguity. The order moves downward through these layers without friction, because friction has been engineered out of the process. Every level understands its role with precision. There is no overlap, no redundancy, no authority leaks upward. The higher the level, the narrower the field of vision. Decisions are made at a distance, where patterns appear clean and variables seem manageable. Below, the environment becomes more complex, but complexity is not a reason to alter instruction. Complexity is something to be managed through discipline. The order is never discussed in full at any single point. It is fragmented by necessity. Each layer receives only what it needs to perform its task. This fragmentation is intentional. It prevents hesitation. It prevents contradiction. It ensures that no one sees enough of the picture to challenge it. Verification replaces understanding. Compliance replaces agreement. Each recipient confirms that the order is legitimate, not that it is correct. Correctness is not a requirement at this stage. Legitimacy is. The language of the order is mirrored in the language of the structure. Both are formal. Both are rigid. Both rely on established phrases that carry meaning without explanation. There is no room for interpretation, because interpretation introduces variation, and variation introduces risk. Procedures activate automatically. Units align their schedules. Resources are allocated according to pre-existing formulas. Adjustments are made within allowed parameters, never beyond them. The structure allows flexibility only where flexibility has been explicitly authorized in advance. Supervision exists, but it is procedural rather than evaluative. Superiors confirm that subordinates are following the order, not that the order is appropriate. Oversight ensures consistency, not judgment. Silence is built into the hierarchy. It is not enforced through threat or fear, but through expectation. Speaking out is not forbidden. It is simply unnecessary. The system does not require commentary to function, and so commentary fades from relevance. Time moves forward according to plan. The order's timeline intersects with dozens of other timelines, all coordinated through centralized scheduling. No single element is allowed to disrupt the rhythm. Delays cascade upward, and disruption is treated as failure. Training reinforces this structure long before the order arrives. Repetition instills confidence in the process. Trust is placed not in individuals, but in the system itself. The belief is simple. If everyone performs their function correctly, the outcome will follow. Responsibility becomes diffuse. Each layer is responsible only for execution within its defined scope. No layer carries the burden of consequence. Consequence exists somewhere beyond the structure, abstract and distant. The order continues its descent, unchanged, untouched by context. The structure holds it firmly, guiding it downward with mechanical certainty. By the time the lowest levels receive it, the order is no longer perceived as instruction. It is perceived as reality. The moment for execution arrives without announcement. There is no shift in tone, no elevation of urgency. The transition from preparation to action is seamless, as it was designed to be. The order does not feel new at this stage. It feels familiar, already rehearsed through repetition and procedure. Movements begin according to schedule. Each action is timed, measured, and confirmed against established protocols. Nothing is improvised. Nothing is adjusted unless the adjustment itself is already authorized by instruction. Precision is valued over awareness. Coordination replaces communication. Signals are exchanged in predefined formats, stripped of nuance. Each signal exists to confirm that a step has been completed, not to evaluate its effect. Confirmation flows upward. Execution flows downward. Individuals perform their roles exactly as trained. They do not need to understand the full scope of the operation. Understanding is not required for compliance. The structure ensures that comprehension is unnecessary. The order specifies sequence. Sequence determines priority. Priority eliminates choice. When multiple actions intersect, the order dictates which proceeds and which waits. There is no debate. The hierarchy resolves all conflicts in advance. Checks are performed. Instruments are read. Positions are adjusted within permitted tolerances. Everything aligns with expectation. When something does not, it is treated as an anomaly to be corrected, not as a signal to reconsider. Silence accompanies the process. Not the silence of uncertainty, but the silence of routine. Words would add nothing. The order has already spoken. Time advances in increments marked by procedure. Each phase completes and hands responsibility to the next. There is no pause between phases long enough for reflection. Momentum is intentional. It prevents interruption. The system rewards accuracy in execution, not awareness of consequence. Success is defined as adherence. Failure is defined as deviation. Outcome remains abstract, deferred to a later stage that no one involved is tasked to consider. The order is followed exactly. No elements are added, none are removed. Every instruction is carried out as written because the structure demands fidelity to the text above all else. When conditions shift subtly, they are absorbed into the process rather than acknowledged. The order remains unchanged, and so the process remains unchanged with it. Adaptation would require authorization. Authorization would require delay. Delay is unacceptable. Each completed action reinforces the legitimacy of the next. The further execution proceeds, the less conceivable interruption becomes. To stop now would mean acknowledging error. and acknowledgement has no place in the execution phase. The system continues forward, confident in its own precision. By the time the final steps begin, obedience has already done its work. The first indications appear without clarity. They do not announce themselves as failure. They arrive as irregularities, subtle enough to be processed as noise within an otherwise functioning system. Measurements deviate slightly. Timings begin to misalign. Reports contain small discrepancies that do not fit cleanly into existing categories. Each anomaly is addressed locally. Adjustments are attempted within permitted limits. The assumption remains that the order is correct and that any deviation must originate elsewhere. The structure encourages this interpretation. It isolates problems and treats them as technical rather than systemic. Information moves upward, but it moves slowly and selectively. Only what is required is transmitted. Context is stripped away to preserve efficiency. What arrives at higher levels is incomplete by design, filtered through layers that prioritize confirmation over analysis. The order remains active. No provision exists for reevaluation once execution has begun. The language that authorized the action contains no conditional clauses, no thresholds for suspension. It was written for certainty, not for reconsideration. As conditions continue to shift, the gap between instruction and reality widens. The system responds by tightening adherence. Protocol becomes more rigid as uncertainty increases. Procedures are followed with greater precision, as if exactness itself could compensate for misalignment. Confusion is present, but it is muted. There is no point at which confusion consolidates into objection. Each individual encounters only a fragment of the problem, insufficient to justify deviation. The structure ensures that awareness remains fragmented. Attempts to communicate irregularities encounter formal boundaries. Reports must follow format. Language must remain neutral. Speculation is excluded. Only observable data is allowed, and even that must align with predefined categories. The order persists unchanged, reinforced by the absence of explicit authorization to alter it. Silence from above is interpreted as confirmation. The lack of response becomes a directive in itself. Momentum carries the system forward. Resources continue to be committed. Timelines continue to advance. The cost of stopping increases with each completed step, making continuation the only viable option within the structure. What was once a controlled operation begins to show strain. The system registers this strain but lacks the mechanisms to respond meaningfully. Correction would require a level of authority that is no longer actively engaged. The failure is no longer hypothetical. It is present, unfolding in real time. Yet the order remains in effect, and so the system proceeds. The transition from strain to collapse is not sudden. It unfolds gradually, carried forward by the same momentum that once signaled efficiency. Systems continue to function, but their outputs no longer align with their intended purpose. Actions are completed, confirmations are logged, resources are expended. The structure remains intact even as its effectiveness erodes. What fails first is coordination. Timelines intersect improperly. Dependencies no longer resolve in sequence. One completed action no longer guarantees readiness for the next. The system compensates by increasing activity, not by reassessing direction. Loss accumulates without a single defining moment. It spreads across the operation unevenly, absorbed into reports that reduce consequence to numbers and categories. Scale replaces specificity. Impact becomes statistical. The order is still referenced, still cited, still used as the basis for continued action. Its authority has not diminished, even as its relevance has. To abandon it now would require acknowledgement that the system itself has misjudged, and the system is not designed for that admission. Communication degrades further. Channels remain open, but meaning thins as urgency increases. Messages become confirmations without context, acknowledgements without substance. The structure prioritizes continuity over clarity. Breakdowns occur within acceptable margins until the margins themselves disappear. Contingencies are exhausted quickly, consumed by a situation they were not designed to address. What remains is exposure, managed through repetition of procedure. There are no decisive interventions, no reversals, no moments of recognition that alter the trajectory. Authority does not reassert itself with correction. It remains distant, abstract, unchanged. The collapse expresses itself through absence rather than spectacle. Absence of expected response. Absence of synchronization. Absence of recovery. The system continues to operate, but no longer achieves its stated objective. By the time the scale of failure becomes undeniable, the order has already completed its course. Everything that was instructed has been carried out. Everything that could be done within the structure has been done. What remains is not chaos, but emptiness where effectiveness was expected. The collapse does not end the system. It confirms it. Afterward, the system does not pause. There is no formal moment that marks the end of what has occurred. Operations conclude according to schedule. Reports are finalized, records are filed. The machinery of administration resumes its normal rhythm, absorbing the outcome without visible disruption. Language shifts subtly. The order is no longer active, but it is not examined. It appears in documents only as reference, as sequence, as background. It is cited without emphasis, surrounded by neutral phrasing that reduces consequence to process. Responsibility disperses immediately. Each component of the structure accounts for its actions within defined limits. Each explanation is accurate, complete, and insufficient. No single account contains enough weight to demand response. Review mechanisms activate, but they are constrained by formality. Analysis focuses on execution fidelity, resource allocation, and procedural alignment. The order itself remains intact, preserved by the same authority that once propelled it forward. Corrections are recommended at the margins. Adjustments to timing, clarifications of wording, minor revisions that suggest improvement without acknowledging origin. The structure refines itself without admitting fracture. Those who carried out the order return to routine. New instructions arrive. New schedules are synchronized. The failure recedes into abstraction, transformed into data points that inform future planning without challenging the foundation beneath them. Silence settles where discussion might have occurred, not imposed but natural. There is no incentive to reopen what has already been processed. The system values continuity, and continuity requires closure without examination. Over time, references become sparse. The order fades from active memory. It is neither condemned nor defended. It simply becomes part of the accumulated past, indistinguishable from countless others that moved through the same channels. Nothing in the structure visibly changes. The hierarchy remains intact. The procedures remain valid. Authority continues to flow downward, unquestioned, precise, efficient. Somewhere within the system, a similar order is already forming. It will move the same way,